Michigan this week wasn't quiet, it was loud with politics, policy, and power moves. From Lansing's late night budget compromises to Detroit's massive street protests, the conversations that shape how we live, how we drive, work, and how we're going to pay our bills this week are all happening right here, not in DC, but in your own backyard. This is Finding the Middle, local edition. We're not here to scream red or blue. We're here to break down what's actually going on across Michigan, what's real, what's noise, and how it all hits your pockets, your road, and possibly even your vote. So if you're tired of the echo chambers and you want receipts, go to the middlegroundmike.com and sign up for the Finding the Middle newsletter. Every map, every budget breakdown, things of that nature are going to be straight to your inbox, no spin, no filters. All right, let's jump into it. Michigan's top stories this week are, powered by what you folks search for and what I can relate to as well, verified by, local reporting and viewing the lens of common sense or partisanship. Let's kind of jump into the budget battle for the roads, Medicaid, and, in fiscal year 26 a little bit. And, this week, the state budget wasn't just numbers. It became a political arena for jobs, healthcare, infrastructure, education. Governor Whitmer, announced that fiscal year 2026 budget invests nearly $2 billion annually in state and local roads, emphasizing every penny at the pump is now going to go to infrastructure. The same budget secures $2.7 billion in federal funding to protect Medicaid services across Michigan. Earlier coverage noted that the budget was passed after months of stalemate, and the agreement included education funding, roads, and disaster recovery allocations so that they can be better distributed to people who need it. This is kind of, infrastructure, education, healthcare are central to Michigan's political alignment going into the 2026 midterms. The Republican controlled House and the Democratic Senate had to coordinate. You'll want to watch how the divisions play out in the upcoming campaigns because now people have crossed party lines depending on some of this, and there's going to be primary challenges and people are going to go after them. Right. So that's going to be very interesting to see. Voters should track what districts see the road funding or healthcare blocked. And that's where campaign ads are going to focus. Like Lisa Ekman says, been on the show several times, follow the money. You follow the money, you're going to find where the campaigns are going to be the strongest. This is the moment to ask, are the dollars going to where the need is the greatest, not just where the politics are the strongest? Lobby your rep for transparency on how road funding maps and Medicaid access maps align with the real needs of the state. Let them know. They don't know unless you tell them. They only go off data. So if you want your rep to get on it, call them, email them, something. It's up to us to change the narrative. Let's talk a little bit about the No Kings protests, Michigan's uprising and political ripple effects from this. Saturday's protest statewide wave under the banner No Kings has stirred more than signs. It's rippling through the politics and fault lines in our state. Thousands turned out across Michigan for the October 18th No Kings protest in Lansing, Detroit, more than 100 locals nationwide. But there was a news station that put out a clip of a No Kings protest from like 4 or 5 years ago. It's 2017, 18, whatever it was. I can't think of the news station. It might have been NBC, CNN, one of the two. Yeah. So, probably it was a big event, but at the same time, the news, once again, major media misrepresenting it. Rally themes, the opposition to perceived authoritarianism, concerns about federal troop deployment, immigration policy, and civil defense, right? These are what's driving and rallying these people to that, right? It's getting them to the table, showing their frustrations. The political responses for, GOP leaders have framed it as radical division. Democrats and organizers emphasize, this is grassroots democracy and accountability. And, the citizens do have the right to kind of look into that and say how they feel, and there is some things that are concerning that the administration is doing in regarding the speech. It definitely feels like, well, you did it, so I'm doing it too. At least to me, to a degree. There's some of it I can understand, but at the same time, people got to be able to oppose you. People got to be able to criticize you without fear of that. Because remember, at some point, there's going to be another Democrat in the White House, right? So that means that you're giving them ammo to do the same thing even more. So let's take a measured approach to this. We've definitely got to watch it. What we really need to watch for is how candidates are going to co-opt and repudiate these movements, right? They're going to call for ranked choice voting, utility political spending reforms, which I would be 1,000% of because the Energy Board of Michigan decides our election gas prices, they are off. I don't know Their thought process, I don't know the thing. All I know is DT, consumers energy, make money, they turn a profit, but yet they never have enough money. And I don't see the average middle class area getting all these upgrades. I see certain more wealthier areas, and I'm not making it about class, right? But I'm just saying, you keep saying we need more and more and more, but yet a lot of the upgrades aren't really moving. And I'm not talking about moving the gas line. I'm talking about what they're saying. We want to put a lot of these lines underground. In these older neighborhoods, it's like really not even happening, right? So let's be real about it. In Metro Detroit, as usual, it becomes a micro battle, suburban protests. The locations may shift how the district votes, right? These protesters, they signal, an energized mobilization ahead of the 2026 election cycle, especially in the swing metro areas, right? There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be for a lot of what's happening. There's going to be a lot that aren't. Make sure that whoever you vote for is consistent in how you feel. And also remember, don't be blind to party. Be loyal to your country and your state. Don't be blinded and go from there. You got to do what you think is right. Vote that way, but don't be just because they're a Democrat, they're bad, or just because they're a Republican, they're bad. Do not vote that way because all you're doing is perpetuating the very problem we all have with the system. Now let's talk about urban development and community benefits and Detroit football club's $198 million stadium deal. So they've been growing for a long time. Old friend of mine, Tony, he got me onto them years and years ago. I mean, they're a growing thing. They got a loyal fan base. They're a pretty darn good team. So now Detroit's going to have a club down there, and it's pretty cool. We're going to have another stadium. Hey, in Detroit, sports and real estate collide with politics all the time. The Little Caesars Arena deal, I was very critical of that. Detroit pretty much was just out of bankruptcy not that long, and all of a sudden we're co-opting a deal for somebody who's a billionaire. Come on. And the public benefits agreement is now under the microscope, right? Because the city's really not seeing a whole lot of like tax benefits that they were supposed to get for certain areas, right? Or some of the owners are getting different benefits that really lack the tax revenue coming in because of it. Well, the Detroit City Football Club has proposed $2.27 million in community benefits tied to its $198 million stadium project in Corktown. The train depot renovation that Ford did, that's going to bring a lot of younger workers down there, and younger people are definitely a lot more in tune with soccer/football than, other generations, right? So this is definitely, I think, a very good location for the stadium. It's going to attract a lot of people. Corktown's it's a bustling, booming neighborhood again, and this is only going to keep pushing it. The benefits include a proposal for a bird-friendly design local small business retail space, $100,000 annually for 12 years towards housing, youth culture, community advisory council and they're still reviewing it. The city community benefits ordinance is being tested now. Big projects now carry more public good strings. Not a bad idea, especially if you're getting a tax credit from the city. Hate it or love it, I see that as fair. Politically, this becomes a campaign talking point. Are you getting value from tax break deals? We've seen what happened with the state jobs program, where it pretty much had generated zero jobs and had already spent a bunch of money. So, are we actually getting something back? The neighborhoods are going to watch the execution of this, see how it goes. Promises are delayed. A backlash could shape the next round of elections for the city and even the state, right? Because that could have ripple effects because the state does similar style programs. Large public subsidy projects need measurable benchmarks. Ask your city council member, when will local business spaces be filled? When will youth programs dollars be delivered to make an impact on my child's life? Public money deserves public accountability, and it takes the average person, not just reporters, it takes the average people putting the pressure on to make a difference. Let's do a little bit of a snapshot now of the 2026 governor election and the legislative stakes, right? 26 is now tuning up. Michigan's going to be a major battleground once again. Governor's race here is really taking shape. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist and Mike Cox are among the declared candidates, though I don't think either one of them really have a solid shot of winning. The entire Michigan Senate and House will be on the ballot. New district maps reflect recent redistricting, so this is going to be huge for the GOP and the Democrats. I think even more for the GOP, right? Because the GOP only has one house. Trump did win on a huge wave, but there's certain things that aren't popular right now, right? So how are they going to navigate still being in line with the national party, but also being responsible to your voters here. That's going to be very interesting to see. The budget and protest dynamic we just covered will feed into campaign themes, right? It's going to be infrastructure versus tax versus democracy versus stability versus party loyalty. Well, the voter mobilization in Detroit and the suburbs, Wayne, Macomb, Oakland, will likely decide control of the legislature and the governorship. Pay attention to endorsements. Pay attention to, like I said, Lisa, she's a former lobbyist. Pay attention to where the money goes. And you're going to find where a lot of your power players are coming from, amongst other things. Polling in mid-October, early signals often show momentum. So don't wait for the campaign ads. Get engaged now. Check your registration, research the candidates. There's a lot out there. We're going to be having a gubernatorial candidate on here hopefully soon. Really nice guy, really great guy. I met his partner. Well, I met a good friend of his. We did an episode that's coming out soon. So I think that one will go very well. Those are your major news stories from the last week, right? The budget breakthroughs, thank God we got through that, and the kids are going to be taken care of. The protest waves, the development deals, and the election buildup. For links, deeper reading and how you can act locally, join the newsletter at the middlegroundmike.com/newsletter. No left, no right, forward.